Now, I've been a big fan of the director Nicolas Winding Refn since he directed Bronson a couple of years ago. That's, of course, the biopic of the famous English prisoner. And Drive is a film I was really looking forward to since I saw the first trailer. Now, admittedly, the trailer did give a little bit too much away for my liking, and I did feel like I'd seen most of the film. But regardless, I was very excited to see this, not least because Ryan Gosling is in it as the main character. Ryan Gosling is fast becoming one of my favourite actors working today. It really is one of those films where your anticipation of it really is going to lead into how you feel about it when you eventually see it. Now, the plot is one I'm sure most people are aware of, and it's about Ryan Gosling, who is the man with no name, the existential driver character whose name is never spoken. He's a man of few words. He basically works as a stunt driver for the movies by day and a getaway car driver at night. You can hire him, and basically he will be in a certain spot for 5 minutes while you do the robbery, and then if you're out within 5 minutes, he will drive you to your location. If not, he'll leave you. So that's his basic job, and he kind of befriends his next door neighbour, played by Carey Mulligan, whose husband has recently returned from prison and is being basically hunted by gangsters. So it turns into basically it's kind of like a revenge film, action movie. It's very much the plot we've seen before, but it's never quite been done this way. And I honestly think I was so surprised with this movie because it is not what you think it's going to be going in, and I'm sure that a lot of people have had this same reaction to it. But basically, I mean, I was expecting, if Nicolas Winding Refn directed The Transporter or Taken, you know, one of those kind of cheap bargain bin Luc Besson movies, which are fun, but they're really nothing more than, you know, a cheap B movie. But this film is very much taking that genre and playing it completely straight with an art house European twist. Now, you've got, like I said, Carey Mulligan playing the neighbour. You've got Albert Brooks playing the main villain in this movie, playing against type. You have Bryan Cranston from Malcolm in the Middle and Breaking Bad in it as almost like Ryan Gosling's mentor, his employer at a garage. So straight away, you know, you're watching the credits of this film and you see these names come up on screen, and you think this is going to be good. You know, all these terrific actors are involved. I'm really looking forward to this. And straight away, the opening scene is absolutely fantastic. Without giving too much away, it's basically a chase scene. It's showing Ryan Gosling do what his character does. He's basically picked up two robbers and he's getting them through LA while being chased by the police. But it's done in such a way, it's not a gratuitous Michael Bay car chase. It's very thought-provoking and almost like chess. You know, the camera never leaves the inside of the car. A lot of the shots are just on Ryan Gosling's face, and you can see him tactically work out where he's going to go, how long he's going to park underneath a bridge so the helicopter doesn't see him, things like this. It's very realistic in that regard. Like, you see this character take his time to work out what he's going to do to evade the police. And while it's a slow-paced scene, it's adrenaline fueled and is just exhilarating in every sense. Like, my heart was racing throughout this scene, and I think that approach applies to the rest of the movie. This film has already gotten a reputation for the amount of violence that's in it, and I have to say I was surprised at just how much, well, not necessarily how much, but just how gratuitous and gory the violence was. Now, as I say, it's already kind of got a reputation for this. People have said, oh, it's an ultra-violent movie, and for Nicolas Winding Refn, he's essentially making something that's very akin to a studio picture, but putting his own spin on it. And the violence, he almost treats it like Sergio Leone treated it back in the 60s when he made the Dollars trilogy. In the violence, and I know that Nicolas Winding Refn has already said in many interviews he treats violent scenes like sex, but it's basically a long build-up, and then there'll be a flash of very gratuitous, very gory violence. Now we're talking exploding heads and faces, and smashed limbs and stuff like this. You know, there'll be a flash of that as a climax, and then the pace will return to normal. And I really like how the violence isn't overblown. It is over in an instant. It does erupt from nowhere. I think it's very realistic in that sense, that the violence does erupt from nowhere, and it's over before you've even had chance to take it in. And I like this approach to violence. It seems like a very kind of organic approach, and it's not, all slow motion gunfights and things that you are used to seeing in this genre, because this is essentially a genre piece. The violence does hit harder when it comes out of nowhere, and I think when it's more realistic as well, because it is oddly restrained, in the sense that there is a scene where Ryan Gosling, and this isn't really a spoiler because it's in the trailer, but there's a scene where Ryan Gosling stomps a guy's head in, and the story is that Nicolas Winding Refn went to Gaspar Noé, who directed Irreversible, and asked him, how do I make a convincing exploding head, so to speak, and that scene, literally most of it is shot and it's just Ryan Gosling's face, and he really sells it. He is fantastic in this movie, and you get a flash of the exploding head. So in that regard, it's very kind of restrained. The camera doesn't linger on the violence at all. It gives you just enough to let your imagination do the rest of the work, because I imagine if the camera did linger and it showed you the prosthetics and everything really up close and for a long period of time, you'd become desensitized to it in the context of the film. But I think allowing you just a glimpse and letting your imagination do the rest of the work is much more effective. So all the performances in this movie are fantastic. There isn't a weak link in the bunch. Ryan Gosling is brilliant. I mean, he's not really given a lot to do. He barely has any dialogue. He barely speaks, but it really says more. This film says more, not only in terms of its dialogue, but its pacing and its narrative. It says more in the silences than anything else. Like, Ryan Gosling can convey so much in a glance or a smile or a wink that you really can't articulate verbally, and I really like that. Now, I know that people will probably complain that they find these bits boring, but I think the Ryan Gosling character really does convey a lot with his expressions, especially in the very convincing relationship with Carey Mulligan. I think the two of them do it so well, because it is as much about their physicality as verbal, and I think this stems from the fact that Nicolas Winding Refn apparently couldn't read until he was like 13, so I think he tries to convey a lot visually in his films, and I really appreciate that, and I think it made for a very convincing romance. Although I do think the standout performance of the film is Albert Brooks, playing against type as the villain, because he is kind of a reluctant villain in the sense that he doesn't revel in the violence. It's just like another aspect of being a gangster that he has to do, and he has to essentially kill people who were his friends, and he acknowledges that, and it's kind of oddly touching the way he approaches the violence. In one certain scene when he has to kill someone, he says to him, I want this to be over quickly, I want it to be painless, and I really liked that approach. It is a little bit different to see a character like that, a character that we've essentially seen a million times before in films like this, to see them not necessarily take a sympathetic approach, because he's not a sympathetic character, he is the bad guy essentially, but you get a little bit more insight into how his mind works, and you could probably understand him a bit more rather than sympathise with him. But overall, the performances that in this film are great, and I think the characters are great as well, and I can't say that any of them necessarily change a lot over the course of the film, but it does provide us with its restrained approach, with an insight into the characters. It doesn't need to spell out for exposition why these characters are the way that they are, but you get hints at it through what they do and what they say, and even down to the clothes. You get a hint at who these people are and where they've come from, but they don't need to spoon feed you the exposition, so I really appreciated that. Overall, I do think that Drive is one of the best films I've seen this year, and I know that some people may struggle with the kind of odd pacing of it, and it is very much paced like a Sergio Leone spaghetti western. It's almost like if Sergio Leone directed Grand Theft Auto Vice City. That's very much what I got from it, and I think some people may struggle with that because it is a bit jarring, but I for one love that, because I love those kinds of westerns, and I love that approach to violence, how it's a long build up and then a very gory climax. I think that's a very interesting, very stylish stylistic approach. I think that Nicolas Winding Refn has managed to bring his undoubtedly encyclopedia-like knowledge of movies and genres, and managed to bring things to this film, stylistic touches that do make it just ooze cool all over the place. The opening title sequence is one of the coolest title sequences I've seen in a long, long time. As I said, Ryan Gosling and Albert Brooks are absolutely amazing, but all the actors like Kerry Mulligan, Bryan Cranston, Christina Hendricks, they're all brilliant in this movie. There's not a weak link. I just can't really fault it. It is really, it's really good for anybody who likes action movies, but anybody who likes interesting action movies that, you know, are as much a character piece as they are an action film. I think you will really enjoy this movie. So Drive is definitely one of the best of the year, and I highly recommend it.